Chapter 11 is called Moses, the Exodus and the Torah. And I want to focus on the Exodus in this video because it is huge, isn't it, as a paradigm. I mean, it's all over Paul's language about the cross. It's used in the New Testament so many times to understand what's happening with Jesus. And of course, it's almost the paradigmatic, I think it is the paradigmatic event, isn't it, of the Old Testament. It sort of sets such a marker in the sand for how Israel is to understand itself and its God. I am the God who brought you out of Israel, and so forth. And I talk about this idea of liberation from slavery in relation to the Exodus narrative and the particular way in which that's framed in the Bible. And I contrast that with what Isaiah Berlin calls the negative freedom that dominates in modern liberal culture, essentially around the iconic sort of Martin Luther King Jr. phrase, "Let my people go," which everybody is very fond of quoting. And the bit that systematically follows that, I think it's mentioned 7 times in Exodus, that phrase, and it's always followed by something like, "that they may serve me." And the modern world sort of holds its head in its hands in that point and thinks, "Oh, you're just going back to slavery. This is terrible. You know, you should have stopped to let my people go." And I try and show how every liberation is contingent on the acceptance of some new, you want to call it a master or some new principle of some sort, and that we can never be globally free. So, for example, if I choose to just follow my desires, then I've got to park my rationality at the door at significant moments. And if I choose to always be scrupulously rational, then I've got to not always follow my desires. I can't free everything at the same time. It's just physically and psychologically impossible. And so this paradigm of "let my people go that they may serve me" is actually a model. I wasn't intending to talk about this in the video. Never mind. I'll do 2 things. Okay, so this is the first one. This is the model of all liberation, but liberation is reluctant to view itself often in these terms. It's all "let my people go," and it's never "that they may serve me," but there's always a "that they may serve me." It's inevitable, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but what you've got to do is choose what you serve carefully. You can't serve nothing, so choose carefully. And I try and make the argument that serving a God who would love you enough to die for you seems very fundamentally wise when it comes to choosing what or whom one will serve. Now, the thing I did want to talk about in this video is the modern emancipation narrative. It's a term that I get from Jean-François Lyotard. I think he mentions it in The Postmodern Condition. He definitely mentions it elsewhere. And he says that the modern world structures time according to a progressive series of emancipation. So in the past, we were enslaved to superstition, or we were physically enslaved, actually physical slaves and so forth, and then we're gradually liberated. And we know that we're making progress because we're more and more liberated than we were. And I suggest, off the back of a book by Michael Walzer called Exodus and Revolution, I think, and a book by John Coffey called Exodus and Liberation, that the Exodus story is the paradigm of the modern emancipation narrative. Essentially, when we talk about liberating and emancipating ourselves, we're drawing fundamentally on shapes of thinking that came out of the Exodus narrative. And so I compare the modern versions of the emancipation narrative to Exodus and try and sort of offer Christians some tools of critiquing the modern emancipation narrative from the point of view of the way in which the Exodus narrative is framed in the Bible.